What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 81. We're filming this early Tuesday morning. Later tonight, we have the final episode of the season taking place on Dana White's Contender Series. 6 fights on the card. That should be a fun one, and I've been focused on that a little bit. Besides that, I'll be quite honest with you guys. This card is not looking too shabby here, UFC Vegas 81. But guess what? This is just a little teaser setting us up for a huge card taking place a week from this upcoming Saturday, where we have UFC 294 taking place, the rematch of Islam Makhachev taking on Charles Oliveira, Paulo Costa taking on Khamzat Chimaev, Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. The card is it's a very fun card. I'm very excited for that. So, the UFC just putting a little bit of a layup card, ahead of UFC 294. So don't expect this fight card to knock your socks off, but you guys know what time it is. You're going to have our spots to make some money, and that's what it's all about. So before we jump into the first fight, if you want to work with me, you guys always know you can reach out to me, whether it's through IG, Twitter, or email, all scrolling below. Shoot me a message. We'll have a good amount of action mixed up with this card here. And if you sign up even for just a one card package, I will actually intertwine UFC 294 with this package. So I'm putting that offer out there. Also, if you're looking to sign up for a new sportsbook, reach out to me. Bovada.lv is the sportsbook I use. If you reach out to me, sign up through my referral link, you're going to get an added bonus, and I will give you that double fight package included as well. All right, so I'm putting out a special deal there for you guys. All right, I appreciate you guys. Please support the channel here. Hit like that button before we jump into the first fight. Subscribe to the channel if you guys have not already. All right, let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have a women's strawweight matchup between Ashley Yoder and Emily Ducote. Some contrast between these two fighters. I think we got a little bit of an old school fighter versus a new age fighter, with Ducote being the more new age fighter. She's had about 3 fights in the octagon now. She came off the Invicta scene. Ashley Yoder's been fighting in the UFC for quite some time. Hasn't been that active. She's coming off quite a layoff as well. About over 2 years since her last fight has taken place. Didn't really typically get her hand raised, but she was always scrappy and kind of put on entertaining fights. Kind of has a look to her. She has a good following on IG and whatnot. So you can kind of understand why she's hung around longer than maybe some other fighters have. Emily Ducote, I got a lot to say about Emily Ducote. Let's talk about Emily real quick. She came off the Invicta scene, and she had some big knockouts on her highlight reel, especially when you're talking about women's strawweight fighters. I would say that her resume was above average for sure. She's had some big knockouts. She came into the UFC, had a phenomenal performance against Jessica Penne, another UFC veteran there, an older veteran in the game. Bloodied her up, absolutely beat her down for 15 minutes. Everybody was thinking, at least I was, and I know a lot of you guys were thinking that she was really the truth and was going to make a run in this division. Her fights, like I said, they've been heavy for me. No action for me on that Penne fight, but then I have some action on her as I headed over to, where was it? Orlando. I headed over to Orlando for that fight against Angela Hill. I was there live, had a small play in her. I think it was a 2-unit play. She absolutely shit the bed against Angela Hill. She was shook up in that fight, didn't throw anything out there, and was picked apart. An absolutely horrible performance, if you ask me. The most frustrating fight that I saw live at that event there. Then I have an 8-unit max play on Lupi Garinez against her in her last fight. So I was very, very heavily invested in that match. Garinez came through, pretty much won every round. There was one round that Ducote kept it somewhat close, but I thought that she actually looked better in that Lupi fight. Lupi is another fighter that is a head case, very up and down performances. Same could be said about Ducote. So, but to this matchup here, here's the thing. Ducote, pretty physically strong, has good takedown defense, which I think could help her here, because Yoder, she's kind of scrappy, but she actually has some good jiu-jitsu skills, and I think that she would want to get this fight to the floor. She would love if this fight had a lot of scrambles happening down on the mat, because I think that if they stand on the feet and they go tit for tat, I think that it favors Ducote. Ducote has more power, and she's pretty technical. And that's really the way that I see this fight going. That's the most probable situation, if you ask me. On the feet, Ducote landing 6.64 strikes per minute so far in the UFC. Of course, those numbers are very skewed based on that Penne fight, but still, she's looked better offensively. But check this out as well, 8.38 strikes absorbed per minute, and those numbers are skewed from that Angela Hill fight as well. I guess you can mix the Loopy fight in that as well, but really it was the Angela Hill fight. So, again, she's all over the place, but I would say I feel much more comfortable taking Ducote. You also remember the layoff that Yoder is coming off of, and, she hasn't been in there for quite a while. Like I said, she's 35 years old. The last time that she was in there, she took a decision loss to Jinh Frey, who a former champion over in Invicta as well, but she really has never really looked that good in the UFC, if you ask me. And that fight took place middle of 2021. So, yeah, she hasn't fought in about two years and 3 months. So it's been a while. Her last victory was against Miranda Granger. It was a decision victory, and she used her grappling in that fight to really get the job done. I would say the highlight of her career was probably a split decision loss to Mackenzie Dern. She kept that fight somewhat close. And one other thing I do want to note is that Ashley Yoder does get in a lot of work with Angela Hill. I know that they do train together extensively, and Angela Hill really had the recipe to go out there and defeat Ducote. I still don't think that will be enough to help her in the cage, though. Give me Emily Ducote to get the job done. And let's go take a look let's go see what this line is talking about. Emily Ducote right now on Jazz Sports is a minus 361 favorite. That is way too high for my liking. Way too high for my liking. She opened up as a minus 273. I wouldn't even really be too fond of that line, to be quite honest. I would probably feel comfortable if I had to have some action on her. I would feel more comfortable having a tag next to her name that states something like minus 240, 250. It's a women's strawweight fight. Ducote is a head case. I still expect her to get the job done, but the value, in my opinion, is definitely on Ashley Yoder, which you can grab almost at a plus 300 line, 3-1 odds. I'm not saying I really trust her to come through. That's why I wouldn't want anything to do with her, even at the dog line. But the value is on Yoder here. But give me Emily Ducote. I'm going to say via decision, but I wouldn't be shocked if Ducote does crack Yoder with some big shots and potentially shakes things up. And let's just mention real quick. You take a look at Yoder's 8 losses. They want to mix in another loss there as well. So 9 losses, all via decision. She's never been finished. She has proven to be pretty damn tough. So yeah, let's go with the decision victory for Emily Ducote. In the bantamweight division, we got Hailey Alateng taking on Chris Gutierrez, the number 15th ranked bantamweight. This was a fight that was very recently put together. Chris Gutierrez was supposed to be taking on Montel Jackson this past weekend, and that fight fell through. I was very disappointed with that circumstance because I did have an official play on Montel Jackson. Although when that 4-unit play fell off the table, I did up my Bill Algeo play from 2 to 4 units, but still, I felt pretty confident Jackson would have got the job done there. Chris Gutierrez now takes on Hailey Alateng. Hailey Alateng, I think he's an underrated fighter. He was supposed to be fighting on this card. I believe he was supposed to be taking on Hani Yahya. Okay, so definitely a different stylistic opponent here. Now you got more of a striking-based fighter and Chris Gutierrez compared to the jiu-jitsu whiz and Hani Yahya. So maybe Hailey Alateng comes into this fight with his grappling very polished up. Maybe he can try to have some success that route. Alateng, though, a pretty well-rounded fighter, but I do expect that Gutierrez will be more polished with his striking, and I edge him there. And I most likely see this fight taking place on the feet. I could definitely see this fight being a little bit of a tit-for-tat kickboxing type of match, and I could see Gutierrez having success with the leg kicks and whatnot. And real quick, we go back to the Brian Shaw picture. I'm a big fan of Brian Shaw's. A World's Strongest Man. I think he's a multiple-time winner, World's Strongest Man representing the United States of America. He's since retired, an absolute stud. You could pull videos of him online grappling with guys like Dustin Poirier, smothering him. And it brings me to this quick question for you guys. He weighs 415 pounds. How in the hell do we not have a super heavyweight division? Okay, we need to have a super heavyweight division. I heard some people talking about this recently. I think they were talking about this on the Joe Rogan Experience. I think it was him and Eddie, and him and Eddie Bravo. Listen, they were saying, where are we going to get these super heavyweights? There's not a lot of them. What you guys aren't realizing, or what they weren't realizing, there's a lot of UFC heavyweights that are cutting down to 266 pounds. So there are a good amount of fighters that probably would be coming in even as high as 300 pounds or whatnot. And you know what? And I think you could leave that division maybe 290 and up to as much as you want. I think that'd be awesome. I think it's discriminatory. How do you not have a division for certain people's weights? That's complete BS. There's no way you can expect a guy like Brian Shaw to cut down to 265. What happens if he wants to fight in the UFC? I think it would be great for the fans. It might be a shallow division at first, but just have that division. Come on, are you kidding me? You want these NFL athletes, these defensive ends, these defensive tackles. Come on, you guys agree with me or what? Sorry, I had to go off on that real quick. But back to this fight. Like I said, man, I just think that Gutierrez will be a little bit more sharp offensively on the feet. He's been known to put a little bit more output on the feet as well. I know a lot of you guys think that Gutierrez is just a patient counter striker, but he's put out more volume than Alatengheili. I would say Alatengheili is actually a little bit more patient than him on the feet, which favors me to take Gutierrez. I think that he just is a little bit he's going to be a little bit more active on the feet, and I'll edge him in a decision here. But I want to be very clear. And one other thing too, though, Gutierrez has been much more technically sound defensively. He's absorbed way less damage than Alatengheili has, absorbing only 2.76 strikes per minute. I know he was dropped in his last fight there against Pedro Munoz, and it wasn't a good look. But still, I think he comes back very hungry for this fight. Coming off the loss, I think this is a good bounce back spot for Gutierrez. But I want to be very clear here. Haile Alatengheili is an underrated fighter, in my opinion. I really believe that he's an underrated fighter. 31 years old, cruising into the prime of his career. Look at his recent performances. Just took out Chad Enhellinger, knocked out Kevin Kroom, the Rat, who hooks up with his best friend's wife, who's going to be taking a beating over at BKFC very soon by my boy, Tony Loco Soto. All right, and then it went to a draw with Gustavo Lopez, another tough customer. I lost Casey Kenny. Casey Kenny's disappeared from the sport, but he's an absolute stud. Victories over Ryan Benoit, Dana Batgarel. I mean, just understand that his resume has actually been pretty good as of recently. When you watch him in the cage, he's a polished fighter, okay? So just be careful here as we head over to the betting line and you look at what we're talking about here. Chris Gutierrez on Bet Online is a minus 325. Again, I'm going to sit here and complain about these lines. I'm going to say, I know some of you guys are like, oh, you don't like any line. I don't like this line of Chris Gutierrez. It's much too high for my liking. He opened up as a plus 190. I don't know what was going on there, but let's take a look over here in Jazz Sports. He opened up as a minus 317. He's now a minus 341. I think that Chris Gutierrez should be somewhere around a minus. I'm going to say it again, just how we talked about the last fight. He should be somewhere in the minus low 200s here. I think the value is definitely on Haile Alatengheili. If you can grab Haile Alatengheili at plus 263, I think there's some value there. If you want to put some trust in an underdog here, I think the value is on Haile Alatengheili, but I will take Chris Gutierrez to win via decision. I'll say he edges out a decision in somewhat of a close fight. He might pick it up in one of the rounds, maybe the second round, kind of really take control of this fight, and he'll be a step ahead. But I think it'll play out somewhat close overall. Over to the women's bantamweight division, we have two fighters that could potentially be making some noise here in the next year or so. I think both these fighters have some potential. Irina Alekseeva taking on Melissa Dixon. Remember now, Irina bursted on the scene, pulled off that knee bar submission over Stephanie Edgar. Stephanie Edgar gets a lot of respect in the game these days, and Irina made her UFC debut, went out there and in a quick grappling exchange, rolled for that knee bar, and she got it. So obviously that was a big victory for her. She looked very good in that fight. Coming into that fight, she was very unproven. Coming into that fight, I believe she was 4-1, and if you took a look at her resume in depth, I mean, coming off a decision loss to a fighter that's very questionable in Kazakh, and then the victories that she had, they weren't really over anyone that was that proven. So a lot of question marks on her. Melissa Dixon, she has looked good to me, man. I like the tape that I was watching on her. She's fought over in Aries as of recently, and had a big time victory in her last fight where she knocked out Daria Zelenziakova, the Russian fighter there. And Daria was a fighter that was undefeated going into that fight. I believe she was about 7-0 going into that fight. I believe she was 7-0. And you know what? When you watch that fight, you could tell both of those fighters were pretty technical and they knew what they were doing. But obviously, I was more impressed with Melissa Dixon. I really like her striking, but also in that fight, she showed some elements of her grappling and really used her ground and pound to finish that fight. Before she finished it down on the mat, which I believe you could actually see the picture of her finishing that fight there. in her IG profile pic. But before she finished it down in the mat, she looked very good on the feet as well. And I know she puts in some work over at a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. So I know she's working on that aspect of her game, and it's going to be important in a matchup like this because Alekseeva has definitely shown that she's dangerous down in the mat. I like Melissa Dixon here because I believe that Melissa Dixon will be the better striker. And if this fight goes down to the mat, I could see Alekseeva going for some wild subs. But if she doesn't pull them off, if she's fishing for knee bars and she doesn't get it, I could easily see Dixon eventually controlling her, getting into a very dominant position and raining down some ground and pound. I've liked what I've seen from her. I think Melissa Dixon will be a little bit of the more physically imposing fighter too. Maybe not by a lot, but I like her frame. I do like her frame for the division. But I'm rolling with Melissa Dixon here, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see a ground and pound finish. Like I said, if Irina is looking for fishing for those subs, and also there's a realistic possibility Irina pulls off a submission as well. So maybe if you're looking at an under, if you can get a really good line in that as well, I could see something wild happening here. But all in all, I like Melissa Dixon. She opened up as a plus 103 underdog. She's now a minus 150 favorite. So action coming towards her way. And I think that's accurate. I think that there should have been action coming in on her, and I like that minus 150 line. I think that's a more accurate line than her coming in as a dog here. I know people might have just been seeing that Irina already had that UFC victory, and they call her what's her nickname? Some kind of nickname in regards to Ronda Rousey, and she's pulling off subs. But let's see how her career goes. Long-term fishing for those kind of subs. I need to see more from her. Her striking is a little wild. It comes from the hips, and I could see Dixon cracking her on the feet as well. Give me Melissa Dixon to get the job done. Over to the lightweight division, Terrance McKinney now takes on the UFC newcomer Brendon Marotte. Terrance McKinney was supposed to be taking on Chris Duncan. Duncan had some visa issues coming over from the UK or coming over from Scotland and whatnot. So Brendon Marotte gets the opportunity here. If you're not familiar with Brendon, Brendon is a team New England cartel fighter. Obviously getting in a lot of work with Rob Font and Calvin Kattar and those types of fighters. I think that he has a very similar type of style as well. When you watch tape on him, he has that Rob Font type style, switching stances a little bit, just a heavy pressure, a heavy boxing attack. And, I can go both ways when we're talking about him here. I could talk some shit about him, but I could say also some things that I liked that I saw when I was breaking down tape on him. I'm going to start with the positives. One thing I noticed is that he's a very confident fighter. He marches forward, like I said, and he's pretty accurate with his strikes. And there's also a thing that I want to say. It's a positive thing about him, but it's also a negative thing about McKinney. McKinney is prone to being hit on the feet. He's a very aggressive fighter, and sometimes he is a little bit defensively flawed, and we've seen him clip before. And I do believe there is a slight possibility that a fighter like Brendon can clip him in a firefight, okay? So we'll start off with that. I think that he'll actually throw some firepower towards McKinney's way to give him a Hail Mary shot, okay? He has that potential. He's an offensive fighter. He'll switch and he'll mix up knees in the clinch. I've seen him drop opponents with a variety of stuff. So he'll have those attacks to throw McKinney's way. The negative thing is that Brendon is very slow, in my opinion, compared to a fighter like McKinney who's going to be lightning fast. And I just think that it's like you got a guy in Brendon who's bringing a pistol to a gunfight where McKinney's walking up with an AK-47 or whatnot. He just has a lot more firepower. He could also mix in the wrestling. I could easily see McKinney, if he fights this fight safely, using his grappling to dominate the fight, just ground and pounding Brendon and just really mollywopping him. All right, so I won't go too much further in detail on this fight. I'm obviously on Terrance McKinney. And this was a very newly added match. I didn't see a line on this fight, but I'm hearing rumors. I saw something on a website. It wasn't really an official line, but I saw some talk about McKinney opening up as a minus 500. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him as a minus 600, 700. I wouldn't be surprised with the circumstances of this fight and Brendon taking this fight on short notice. I know some of you guys are probably thinking, oh, there's value on McKinney, throw him in a parlay. Well, you better be getting actually a decent line. You better be getting a minus 500 line, okay? I think that if you start getting these crazy lines, there's not as much value there as you think there is, because you're going to be very disappointed if this kid comes in and actually looks to bring the fight and then ends up clipping McKinney with a counter shot. I'll just say that, okay? So Again, no betting line to pull up for you guys right now. I think McKinney is going to be right around that minus 600-700 range. I think that's what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. Okay, keep an eye on this newcomer. And again, if you pull up, and one other thing I want to say, you know, I was talking about the negatives. Another thing that's kind of negative, that's some red flags on his resume, the level of competition, and then he also took a recent loss back in 2019. It was about 4 years ago to a questionable fighter in Adley Edwards. Okay, and then also hasn't been extremely active as well. He had about a 3-year layoff before his last 2 fights. So there's some things going on there. And obviously, you guys know McKinney is an absolute stud, man. He's just a ball of energy. He's a real firework, man. He's there to explode and cause the scene in the cage. So give me Terrance McKinney via finish, right? I mean, you can't go wrong with the finish. Targeting a finish there. If I have to pick a way that this fight goes, McKinney is a fight finisher. And let's check this out. Out of his 14 victories, 6 via knockout, 8 via submission. He's never won a decision before. And he also does go out in his shield, like I said, though. Out of his 6 losses, 4 knockouts, 2 subs. There's no decisions going on when McKinney steps in the cage. That's what I'm saying. But so I'll edge that McKinney knockout. Over to the women's bantamweight division, we have 2 Brazilians facing off. Tainara Lisboa, who's coming off a UFC debut victory, a big-time submission victory against Jessica Rose Clark. She's taken on the UFC newcomer, Ravena Oliveira. And if you're looking up tape on Ravena Oliveira on YouTube, notice that she will have a different last name. So maybe she was recently married, or it's one of those Brazilian things where they swap last names depending on what parent was treating them better that week. All right, you know, just a joke there. But seriously though, if you're looking to watch tape on Ravena, I was not that impressed with the tape I was able to pull up on Ravena. Just seemed like a sloppy, tough-nosed fighter. Who's looking to get her feet under her in the game, has a lot to learn, you know, clinching up against her opponents against the cage and whatnot. On the other hand, Lisboa has impressed me. This is a fighter that has very sharp striking. She's very well-rounded, obviously showcasing submission skills, submitting a longtime UFC vet in her debut. Seems to be pretty cold-blooded coming into her debut, just no jitters and whatnot, getting the job done. I've liked what I've seen, and I'm not going to harp on this fight too much. I mean, I think that with the limited amount of tape that we're able to pull up on Ravena against very, very shallow competition. That's another thing that you have to take into consideration. So even moments where she's looked good in those fights, she's fighting very shallow competition. And I would argue that she could have even have done more earlier on in some of those fights. She was kind of, you know, the fights kind of played on length. They played on kind of long, and she was just, you know, looking to make things work in there, where I feel like if you threw Lisboa in there with those other girls, I think that she's absolutely finishing them. So I think that Lisboa is going to be another very talented Brazilian women's mixed martial artist that's well-rounded. And you guys know that the Brazilians have really been putting out a lot of talent. Okay, on the women's side of things, as of recently, over the last couple of years, they've been looking really good. You gotta lean Lisboa here. I mean, everything points towards her way. The only X factor you could say for Ravena is that you know, the book is not out on her, and maybe she just rises to the occasion and puts herself on the map. But again, fighting low-level fighters, at least she's been getting some finishes. Like I said, getting some of those finishes. Like I said, some of them probably should have happened earlier on in the fight, but she's had her first-round finishes as well, but a couple later finishes, third-round finishes. And I think that Lisboa would have finished those opponents early on in those fights. Those are the ones I pulled up on YouTube as well. So give me Lisboa. Let's go take a look at the betting line. Lisboa right now as high as a -350 on Bovada, open as a -385. So action going the other way, but it opened up as a big-time favorite, so it's understandable why it kind of dipped the other way. 353 to 317. You know, maybe there's some information that's coming out that Ravena is game for this fight. You know, with the action coming in on her, you got to kind of watch what's going on with the line there. But I'm telling you guys, I am on Lisboa for sure. I think that Lisboa is actually going to be a solid addition to the division. Darren, the Damage, Elkins taking on TJ Downtown Brown. Fight taking place in the featherweight division. You know this fight should be a fun one because anytime Darren Elkins steps into the cage, it's a bloody, wild affair. And really, as of recently, you can kind of say the same thing about TJ Brown. He's been bringing the fight. He has quietly hung around in the UFC for some time now, since his Dana White's Contender Series fight that was on one of the earlier seasons. And, Darren Elkins, let me talk about the damage here real quick. This is a fighter that I've been watching way back from the WEC days. All this guy knows how to do is fight. Has great cardio. When you talk about some of the best chins that we've ever seen in MMA, I think you have to throw Elkins' name in there. Some of the greatest comebacks that we've ever seen, if you remember the Mirsad Bektik fight. And I'll say this much. There's a lot of fighters these days, man, that are cut from the cloth of a Darren Elkins. I think that those white boys from the USA need to get more credit as far as the durability and the chins go. We always give props to the Mexican fighters, which is well deserved. They're as tough as it comes, and they do take a shot like the best of them. But what about these fighters like Darren Elkins, the Trevor Peaks of the world, the Chris Liebens back in the day? There's so many fighters like this that represent the USA that you could straight up grab a baseball bat and whack them upside the face, and they keep coming forward. You guys know what I'm talking about. Start listing a bunch of those fighters down in the comment section. But, I want a little bit more credit for the white boys in the USA, man, because these guys are absolute savages, and Darren Elkins is one of the top dogs in that pack there. Here's the thing. I've been fading Darren Elkins for some time, and he's definitely made me pay for it, but I've also capitalized in some certain spots. Specifically, I had a big play on Nate Landwehr. That was a nice fight that I capitalized there. The Ricardo Lamas fight also, I capitalized there, but he made me pay when I targeted him with Derek Minner. Now, who knows if Derek Minner was even trying to win that fight? If you guys know the details with him, I won't go on too much about that. It's been something we've been talking about as of recently. He was throwing fights. He made me pay with the Tristan Connolly underdog stab as well. So, but I did cash in on JSP. And again, for whatever reason, Elkins is a fighter that I've been fading for a long time. And I'll tell you why. It's because offensively, I think that he sucks offensively on the feet. This is a guy that makes a living winning fights by taking so much damage that his opponents wear out, or eventually they kind of gas out, and then he uses his grappling and his cardio to take over the fight. So it always just seems so appetizing when you have a fighter that's more athletic and just more crisp with his striking, and you just know he's going to tee off early on, and maybe you think that knockout's there. And that's kind of how I see this fight going as well. I'm edging TJ Brown to just be a step ahead. He should land some big shots early on because Darren Elkins is stiff. He's there to be hit, but Elkins will probably absorb a bunch of that damage, and he'll look to try to break TJ Brown later in this fight. And I have seen TJ Brown kind of make some mental errors and get sloppy as the fights go on. So that is a danger when you're talking about this matchup here, but I still will take TJ Brown to win this fight. I just think that he will land, and I don't know. Darren Elkins now almost 40 years old. You can't take damage like that forever, man. I think that it does catch up with you, and we should start seeing Elkins go out Chuck Liddell style sooner or later. He doesn't want to retire, so I think that he has to have a Liddell type of ending to his career. I mean, that's just how the fight game is, okay? If someone's going to prove me wrong and this guy is just a different animal, obviously, I mean, this is the guy here. But, you look at some of the output these guys have put throughout their careers, very similar output, right around that 3.5 landed per minute. They've absorbed very similar amount of strikes per minute. But, when you watch the tape, man, TJ Brown has been a little bit sharper offensively, and he's the younger, fresher fighter. That's why I am on TJ Brown. So let's go take a look at the betting line. Brown is currently a minus 210 on Jazz Sports. He opened up as a minus 240 essentially. So slight movement going Elkins' way. I like TJ Brown. Like anything from minus 225 and down, I think is not a horrible line, which is about as high as it is right now. But don't be surprised if you see TJ Brown touch that 240 line. I don't know. I know the line's been kind of going the other way towards Elkins' way, but I don't know. I think when people really dive into the tape and just see the damage that this guy Elkins takes and see his age and whatnot, people might start to think that Brown's going to land and could potentially put him out. Maybe he finishes this fight early. Also, TJ Brown has good wrestling skills as well, so he can keep this fight standing where he could showcase his striking. He has a wrestling pedigree. I think he should use his wrestling and conditioning to keep this fight standing, be patient, and look to land some big shots. All right, so yes, give me TJ Brown. Am I going to pick TJ Brown to get a finish over Darren Elkins? Darren Elkins, you take a look at his losses, just he's only been finished 4 times out of 11 fights. Recently Cub Swanson was able to land a knockout on him. I'm going to say TJ Brown gets a finish. How about that? I'm going to say TJ Brown lands that big shot on Elkins, and we start to see the demise of the longtime UFC, WEC fighter Elkins. We got two of the hottest prospects in the game facing off. I would say this is the most exciting fight on the card for me. I mean, you could argue maybe the main event, of course, Yusuff and Barboza, but this is it for me. I'm very high on both these prospects here. Cameron, Saaiman taking on Christian, Rodriguez, C-Rod. You know, C-Rod didn't get that contract when he got the victory on Dana White's Contender Series. He went off, got another victory, and then got his opportunity. But we've always been hearing rave reviews about C-Rod over at Team Rufus Sport since he was a young buck training with some of the better names in the game. He's extremely well-rounded. You know, the victory that he had over Raul Rosas Jr. is what put him on the map, because Raul Rosas Jr. had so much hype when he went out there and really outclassed him. I think that he stole a lot of that hype, and you're seeing it reflected on the betting line here, coming in as a favorite over the very respected Cameron Saaiman. He had a submission victory over Joshua Weems in the first round in his UFC debut. Or excuse me, not in his UFC debut. I'm sorry there. He did take a loss against JSP. We got to mention the JSP loss. I almost don't even count it as a loss. I'm trying to remember if he took that fight on short notice. But the thing is, JSP is a stud and has some serious wrestling abilities in the cage, and he uses wrestling to stifle C-Rod. But you see that C-Rod's continuously working on all aspects of his game. He bounced back with a submission victory. Also had a submission victory in between the Dana White's Contender Series win and his UFC debut against Ryan McIntosh. Just understand that he's a very technical striker. He's a very patient striker and has some crafty submission skills. I like this kid. Okay, now when we talk about Cameron Saaiman, this dude is an absolute stud as well. I would say that he's a little bit more offensively aggressive compared to a C-Rod. You know, Saaiman's really looking to buzzsaw you. He's very, very accurate, very nasty with the striking as well. I think that he's a very well-rounded fighter as well. He can grapple. He can do it all. He's a fighter. You know, I believe that he grew up in the mixed martial arts world. I think his father was running a fight promotion over in South Africa. Okay, so I mean, this is all this kid knows, man, and he's an absolute stud. Switches stances nonstop. When you watch him, you know, fighting in the cage, it really does look like you're watching a video game character. That's the way he moves. Obviously, at the lower weight classes, he's so quick. It's kind of reminiscent to watching Demetrius Johnson fight, like a Mighty Mouse type fighter. If you guys know what I'm saying, with the stance switches and just the quickness and the how technically sound he is. I'm very fond of watching him fight. I'm so excited for this fight, and we'll get to the betting line here. As I mentioned, C-Rod is the favorite here, and as I get to my pick, I think it's important that I have the betting line pulled up, because C-Rod is as high as a -175. It dropped to a -165 non-Bovada. Opened as a -150. He's a decent favorite, a slight decent favorite here. I'm so torn on this fight, man. I think that you're really flipping a coin when you're talking about this matchup here. I really believe that. So where's the value? The value has to be on the underdog here. The value is on Cameron Saaiman. When you're talking about you can catch him as high as a +145 dog almost. Dip back to a +135 right now, but still, the value's on the dog here. Okay, this fight, they're so evenly matched. I think anything could happen in this fight here. It's worth noting that Saaiman's still only 22 years old. I know C-Rod 25, there's going to be a lot of room for growth as well, and he's going to look better and better when we see him in there every time. But 22 years old, I think we're going to see even more of a magnified amount of growth in Saaiman's game. He might show up and just look to be phenomenal in this fight, but he's going to have a fighter that is very, very defensively sound, so it's not going to be easy for him just to go out there and pick Rodriguez apart. It's going to be a chess match. And one other thing that I will point out as well, I know he's coming off another knockout victory there in the first round, but Terrance Mitchell is a bum, and you know the quality of opponent not too high there, but got the job done against Martinez, a tough fighter. Had the knockout over Stephen Kozlow, kind of a crafty veteran type dude. Josh Wang Kim is an underrated fighter when you look at his resume. He has an extensive amount of amateur fights and went out there and just dominated him in that fight, took over as the fight went on. Saaiman has great cardio. Give me the underdog here. Both men very, very similar in stature. Rodriguez will have a 1-inch reach advantage and excuse me here. He'll actually have about a 1-inch disadvantage in height, if you will. Just very, very similar statures, and both men. Give me the dog here. Let me not chirp too much more. As you guys can see, I'm very excited for this fight. I'm gonna say that Cameron Saaiman wins a decision in a fight that is just an absolute chess match. Edgar Cháirez taking on Daniel Lacerda. this is a fight that just took place a couple weeks ago, and I had some official action on Edgar Cháirez. I felt very comfortable with the way the fight was going. If you remember, Cháirez had that I think it was like a standing guillotine, right? He had it kind of locked up, and yeah, it was a premature stoppage, but I still felt that Cháirez could have potentially solidified that choke, or either way, he was going to take that fight over and break Lacerda down. Lacerda, this dude is he's a very aggressive fighter, fighting at a team shooto box and all that, but this dude is very defensively flawed. Going into that fight where he was essentially finished, he was actually finished 1, 2, 3, 4 times before that. You can argue he's on a 5-fight losing streak where he was finishing all of them. Like I said, man, you guys know I had official action on Cháirez, and I think Cháirez gets the job done once again. He's just extremely durable. Cháirez has underrated submission skills, and he's a very hard-nosed fighter. He has underrated striking. We saw that on Dana White's Contender Series, and he's been fighting some stiff competition when you take a look at his losses. I just want to bring this up once again. You take a look at the losses that he's had, Tetsuro Taira and Clayton Carpenter, 2 of the top prospects coming up in the UFC's flyweight division. And in between those 2 losses, getting 2 submissions there, had a 4th-round submission going later on in fights, showing great cardio. I think that Cháirez is a stud. He's a tough dude, and I think he goes out there and gets the finish over Lacerda once again. We'll take a look at the betting line, which I believe I had a better line on it last time around. This line has had some time to marinate. You can catch him right around a -300 right now, maybe a potential parlay piece. Cháirez is the fighter that should be getting his hand raised when it's said and done. Via finish, too. I'm about to click out of there. Let me let you guys know. I know some of you guys complain I don't always give you an exact method. Cháirez via submission, 1st or 2nd round submission. Over to the middleweight division, I mentioned that Saaiman versus C-Rod fight was the best fight on the card. Well, this is another fight you could probably toss into the hat for being one of the most exciting matchups. Andre Petroski steps in on short notice after Marc-Andre Barriault has to withdraw from this fight. We're very, very happy to see Michel Pereira back on a UFC fight card, one of the most entertaining fighters in the game, but coming off a little bit of a layoff here, very familiar with his last fight. We had some official action on him at, I believe, underdog odds it was that I grabbed him. That was a while ago, but I think it was slight underdog odds, right around pick'em odds. It was against Santiago Ponzinibbio, and a great fight. And listen, Michel Pereira, this dude has shown that he is cut from a different cloth with the athleticism, the movement, and whatnot. He is such a dangerous fighter. A lot of people thought that he was just a gimmick when he first bursted on the UFC scene. Maybe I was one of them. I thought he was somewhat of a gimmick fighter with all that wild movement and whatnot, and just more of an entertainer. I am definitely not a believer of that to be the case these days. I really, truly believe that he is just a fully well-rounded, dangerous opponent. This guy can outstrike you. He's lengthy, he's long, he's hard to get in on. It's hard to grab a hold of his legs to try to get a takedown. He has good takedown defense. He's just an overall dangerous fighter. And if you're not on your P's and Q's, he will absolutely embarrass you like we saw him do when he really started this run where he went out there and clowned Zelim Amadayov, right? Remember now, he absolutely was destroying Diego Sanchez as well. There was a DQ there. The only loss that he's had in the UFC was where he kind of broke down with this cardio against Tristan Connolly. But besides that, he's been a completely different fighter. Was finishing Diego Sanchez, absolutely clowned Zelim Amadayov, submitted him in the 3rd round after smacking him around for almost 3 rounds there. Defeated Chaos Williams, Nico Price, Andre Fiallo, and then Santiago Ponzinibbio. And the Andre Fiallo that he beat, maybe you could say that was before he was much more of a shell of himself as he is these days. You know, I want to say this as well. You know, Andre Petroski is a fighter that always shows a lot of love, follows me on IGs, always liking my posts and whatnot. So he's not going to be happy when I see that I'm picking Michel Pereira over him. But you guys know I got to keep it real. I got to keep it real here. Andre Petroski's a stud, and he's definitely evolved his overall fight game. He was more of just a tough-nosed wrestler. He's been working on his overall game, his striking, and mixing in the grappling with his striking. And if he's going to go out here and get the job done, he's going to have success with his wrestling. I just feel that he's going to struggle a little bit as he's trying to get the fight down to the mat. And I could see Pereira just hurting him, maybe landing at some type of knee as he comes in and just outstriking him. I think this is a fight that I got to lean Pereira. Petroski taking the fight on short notice as well. You saw him in his last fight against Meerschaert. You know, he pushed through that fight to get the job done. But Meerschaert had little moments within that fight as well. Sometimes Petroski is there to be hit, and I could see Pereira landing on him a little bit here and there. So the grappling will be paramount for Petroski to get his hand raised. But at the same time, it is worth mentioning that Petroski does carry some power. This is the fight game, 4-ounce gloves. You never know. Maybe you can clip Pereira, but that movement is just too much. I don't see him finding him. So right now, Pereira is a minus 170 favorite. He opened as a plus 190. I don't know how that line opened up at plus 190 on Bet Online. Didn't last long at all. He's a minus 170 right now. He just was a minus 150, so that line just moved as well. And still a minus 150 on Bovada. Oh, excuse me here. Sorry about that. That was the Jennifer Maya line. Excuse me. Yeah, we could pull it up here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but on BetUS, he opened as a minus 145, and he's now a minus 170. So you can't even catch that minus 150 line right now. It's a newly added match, so you're going to see different lines, playing out over the next couple of days here. But give me Michel Pereira to get the job done, however you want to say that. And what do you got? Can you guys comment? Are you calling him Pereira? Is it Pereira? I know you guys want to get on me about these names sometimes. I do the same thing with Alex Pereira. Is it Alex Pereira or is it Alex Pereira? Try to put my little Brazilian Portuguese accent on it. Try to get fancy for you guys. And then sometimes it ends up biting me in the butt there. I got Michel winning this fight, and I wouldn't be shocked if he gets a finish in the second or third rounds, one of the later rounds. If Petroski's really struggling to get this fight down, it's getting picked apart. Adrian Yanez steps back into the cage, coming off a very tough loss. And he has a tough opponent in front of him, and Jonathan Martinez. You guys know I had the pleasure of chatting it up with Yanez back in the day as he came off that Dana White's Contender Series victory. He has really, really carved a name out in the game for himself since that victory. He's really solidified himself as a legit UFC fighter that fans are very excited to watch perform. He is known as one of the better boxers in the game. And this is a very, very fun matchup because Jonathan Martinez is a very sharp striker as well. So this fight should be a good one. Both men 29 years old, both men with the 70-inch reach, almost the same height as well. You get the 14th versus 13th ranked bantamweight fighters here. Two guys that they have cracked their way into the top 15. This is a great fight. Jonathan Martinez is coming off a big victory over Said Nurmagomedov, but the truth of the matter is that he didn't win that fight. Letting you guys know that right now. But he did keep it close enough to get a robbery there. So that does say something against a high-level opponent like Said. Said kind of gassed out a little bit, but he still easily won 2 rounds, in my opinion. Before that, he had the knockout victory over Cub Swanson. Decision victories over Vince Morales, Alejandro Perez, a decent fighter, Turbo Perez. Victories over Lacerda, the Georgian fighter, I believe. He had that knockout loss to Davey Grant. That was a fight that he was up on the scorecards up until that time, got cracked with the big shot. We know that Grant has done that to oppositions at times. Victories over Thomas Almeida, Frankie Saenz. Just kind of going through his resume. Not a lot of huge names besides the Swanson and the Nurmagomedov, but just understand that Martinez has plenty more time to get those big feathers in his cap down the line. Just 29 years old. He'll have some big victories on his resume over the next 3-4 years. I do believe that. I think he'll also have some tough losses still as well. I still haven't really forgot that Davey Grant loss. That was horrible. I know he's learned from that. But we'll see how his career plays out. And Adrian Yanez is a fighter that you could really say many of the same things about. I think he has a lot of big victories coming up in the near future for himself, but I also think he has some big losses coming up in the near future. And I might even say that a little bit more emphatically when we're talking about Yanez compared to Martinez, because Yanez, he is so good offensively, but seems to freeze up a little bit at times with his defense. It's like he throws strikes, he doesn't move his head off the center line, or he's just so aggressive that he doesn't mind, or I think he does mind. I don't know. It's just kind of, he leaves his head there. It's like he throws these offensive onslaughts and then he's there to be countered. And we really saw this being a problem when he fought against Randy Costa. In the Randy Costa fight, he was teed off on early on in that fight. Eventually, he came into the second round and broke Costa down. But we have seen him landed on the Davey Grant fight as well. He was landed on very much so in that fight. It looked great against Tony Kelly, but then Rob Font went out there and did the same thing and finished him up. So understand that Yanez is coming off a very tough knockout loss. He is there to be hit. And I think that Jonathan Martinez is a sharpshooter and can easily find the mark here and can counter Yanez. So as long as Martinez avoids that knockout early on, I think that Martinez is going to be very likely to hurt Yanez in this fight at some point in time. Maybe he gets the finish, but at the very least, he's going to drop him. He's going to hurt him. He's going to land the mark. And I'm taking Jonathan Martinez to defeat Adrian Yanez. I know you guys all love Yanez, and he'll be coming into this fight as the favorite. He has the big name. When things are going good, his boxing looks so good. I mean, he is a fighter that a lot of you like. And in fact, actually, we take a look at the betting line right now. Let's hold on one second here, because I know I saw him as a favorite on some line. See, like on my bookie, he was a -133. This line is closing now as a straight pick'em, actually. So I know he was a slight favorite on my bookie, and the line is closing. We take a look over on Bet Online. He was a -300 favorite on Bet Online. Isn't that crazy? And at one point in time, he was a slight dog at +105, and now it is straight up pick'em odds. Okay, so I guess it depends what book you were looking at. But overall, I would say Yanez was coming into this fight as the favorite for sure. And this line is a pick'em line right now. I feel more confident in Jonathan Martinez. Just he seems, we talked about how that knockout loss that he had against Davey Grant. But all in all, I would say he is more reliable defensively than Yanez right now. And I think this fight is going to be a firefight. I think that Martinez will be the fighter that holds up. Give me Jonathan Martinez via first or second round finish here. So it is what it is. This is the co-main event of the event. Jennifer Maia, the number 9th ranked flyweight fighter, taking on Viviane Araújo, the number 11th ranked flyweight fighter. Jennifer Maia, I guess we'll start off with talking about her a little bit. She's really had a late resurgence in her career when you think about it. I think that she's looked as good as she's ever looked as of recently, coming off victories over Marina Moroz and Casey O'Neill. You take a look at her losses, they're all against high-level opponents: Manon Fiorot, Caitlin Chikogian, and Valentina Shevchenko. Okay, and she lost twice to Chikogian. Chikogian, a very much underrated fighter. Also had a loss to Liz Carmouche back in the day. Carmouche now the champion over in Bellator. You know, victories back in the day over, how about this victory? Maybe not a lot of you guys realize, had a victory over Jessica Andrade back in the day. And Maia, very much known for her grappling abilities, but her striking has came around very much so. She's very aggressive, and it's paid dividends in her performances in the cage. Viviane Araújo, I could argue to you that she's a little bit more of a polished striker, a little bit more athletic, has that pop and has good movement. But, you know, I'm going to cut to the chase here, man. I think that the experience that Maia has, Maia with 31 professional fights compared to the 15 professional fights of Araújo. Araújo also, you know, you take a look at some of her recent performance, she's kind of dropped the ball. I know she's been fighting very good fighters as well, and Ribas, Grasso, Chikogian, but still came up short in all those fights. As the fights progressed, I feel like she lacks a little bit of confidence and that push to really snatch those fights up. You know, some of her bigger victories as of recently, of course, the Andrea Lee fight, that was a good one for her there. I think that was the biggest fight of her career, I would say. Went out there, really worked Roxanne Modafferi, as did Maia. And, you know, she has some good names on her resume. She knocked out Talita Bernardo. Bernardo, a fighter that unfortunately isn't in the UFC, has had a lot of success outside of the octagon after losing that debut fight, I believe. I believe that was her debut fight. But Bernardo, a good fighter. Victories over Alexis Davis. So I just want to make it clear that I do have respect for Araújo. I think she's a dangerous fighter. She's a good fighter. But I'm going to back Maia here. I just think that Maia is going to have that pressure. She's going to make things ugly. And again, she's been working on her striking, so it's not as ugly as performances way back in the day. She's looking a little sharper with her boxing. She's putting good output out there as well. She has the movement going and all that. And I'm going to back Jennifer Maia, actually. And you take a look at the stat line here. Araújo has been absorbing more damage throughout her career, slightly more damage than Maia. And offensively, very similar. Take a look at the grappling. One thing I would say that's good for Araújo is Araújo has showcased good takedown defense. And if Maia looks to push to get this fight down to the mat where she could have a lot of success, that might be hard to do because Araújo does, she has showcased an 82% takedown ratio throughout her career. She has good footwork, but I could see Maia getting this fight down to the mat maybe in the second or third round, maybe as this fight progresses, maybe even early on too, when they're not sweaty. Maybe she gets a hold of her and rips her down. She's looked very physically strong. She's been very physically imposing on her opposition. Again, and all aspects of the game too. If she doesn't even look to take her down, she'll clinch her up, push her against the cage. She'll throw some nasty 1-2s. Give me Jennifer Maia. The experience. I think that she's peaking as a fighter, even though she's 35 years old. I think she's actually peaking as a fighter right now. Opened as a minus 144. She's now a minus 146. The line went up, down, a little bit of a bipolar line there. I think that a minus 140 line is an accurate line on Maia. She shouldn't really be too much of a favorite here. It's a close fight. It's a very dangerous fight. I could see the fight going either way, to be quite honest. And I would argue to you that there's more value on a dog line here. So if you can grab plus 130 in Araujo, I think there's more value on the dog line because this fight's very unpredictable, in my opinion. A women's flyweight matchup of two good fighters. Here it is, the main event. Two top 15 ranked featherweight fighters. Sodiq Yusuff taking on Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza, one of the greatest strikers that the sport has ever seen. This guy is built from a different cloth, to say the least, man. This guy's, 37 years old, I believe, and still looks to be in phenomenal shape, getting in that work over at American Top Team in Coconut Creek. I mean, you cannot question this guy's work ethic, okay? This isn't just some talented, athletic fighter. This is a guy that has a crazy, crazy work ethic, okay? You don't just have all the success that he had at the lightweight division, you start to drop down to the featherweight division somehow with your frame, come in on weight every time so professionally, and have the success that he's had even in the featherweight division, and be 37 again. I want to mention he's 37 years old. You don't do that without being extremely disciplined, motivated. This guy, he checks off all those boxes. I'm a huge fan of Edson Barboza. And again, since he dropped down to the featherweight division, did take a split decision loss against Dan Ige. A lot of people thought he should have edged that fight out, but then victories over Makwan Americani, the Shane Burgos knockout victory. That was amazing. That fight was just a barn burner, and eventually he dug deep and got the victory there. He was knocked out against Giga Chikazi. He was kind of grinded out by Bryce Mitchell. We know Bryce Mitchell's a stud now. The way he rebounded after that loss to Taporia and the way he looked in his last fight against Dan Ige, Mitchell is just a tough outing for anybody. But the way he landed that knee, too, on Billy Q, as Billy Q is stepping in there for the takedown. I mean, just phenomenal. Another highlight reel knockout by Barboza. Barboza has one of the greatest knockouts that I've ever seen. If you remember that spinning wheel kick against Terry Edom back in the day, I'll never forget the bar I was at and how the bar reacted to that knockout. Just a crazy, crazy knockout. I know you guys have all seen it. If you haven't, definitely pull that up. So, I'm raving about Barboza over here, so I think you guys kind of know where I'm going with my pick here, but I want to dissect this fight a little bit more. The thing I like about Barboza, even though he's 37 years old, like I said, he's going to be coming in phenomenal shape. He takes such good care of himself, and I have a feeling this fight is going to be a striking affair, which Sodiq Yusuff is a very sharp striker, but Edson Barboza, I think, is going to be a little bit of a step ahead in that type of fight, and as long as he doesn't get clipped with the big shot, doesn't get finished, I could see Barboza edging out Yusuff and taking at least three rounds in a 5-round fight if it goes to a decision. Obviously, that's a big if, but and I do want to just mention again, Sodiq Yusuff is a phenomenal striker. If you remember his performance on Dana White's Contender Series where he bursted on the scene against Mike Davis, I mean, I instantly knew when I was watching that fight that both of those guys were high-level UFC caliber fighters, and that did prove to be true. Mike Davis, for whatever reason, hasn't been that active. You guys know I had him on the show, and he struggles with eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch for dinner and stuff like that, but just a great fighter. I don't know why he doesn't just really make a run in the fight game, but when I was watching that fight, it was very clear that Sodiq Yusuff is just a great fighter, and he was the underdog in that spot. Came through, got the victory. Victories over Suman Mkhitaryan, Saaiman Moraes, Gabriel Benitez. He was tagged in that Benitez fight early on, if you remember. Then eventually got the knockout later in the first round. But that was a huge card too, I believe. Yep, the Cormier Miocic 2 card, and he was tagged early on. He was almost finished. Decision victory over Andre Fili. And, the one questionable loss was the Arnold Allen loss, which I know Allen's a good fighter, but was kind of stifled in that fight. And I could see Barboza doing something similar. And, the victories over Don Cháirez and Alex Cáceres don't really do it for me, especially not the Don Cháirez fight. So, I think Barboza is the route to go here. And we're going to pull up the betting line, but I think Barboza can win a decision fight. He could obviously land a knockout. I mean, he's a knockout artist. The value, in my opinion, is on Edson Barboza. He opened as a plus 170. He's now plus 145. I think the value is definitely on him here. He has a great amount of experience, and I know people kind of question how he'll look later on in fights, the way he carries a lot of muscle mass and all that. I think he's shown to have good cardio. He digs deep. He's a plus 137 on Jazz Sports. He opened up as a plus 137, went down to a plus 122, 118 or whatnot, and went back up to a plus 137. So we've seen The line kind of moving a little bit back and forth. But Barboza is the dog here, and I like the value on him. And I think this should be a great fight. And I expect to see Barboza mixing things up on the feet. And again, he looks phenomenal going into this fight. I mean, he looks to be in great shape and seems to be having a great camp over at American Top Team going into this main event slot here. So give me the underdog Edson Barboza to get the job done. Wouldn't be shocked if we see a knockout, but I'll favor maybe more of a decision. Sodiq has shown to be pretty tough and durable. Real quick, I want to pull this up. Sodiq Yusuff, if you take a look at his losses, his two losses, he was knocked out once before, and that was the loss that he took to Luis Gomez over at Titan FC. And I've seen Luis Gomez fight actually live, I believe, over at Titan FC as well. But got clipped there in the first round. Don't be shocked if Edson Barboza gets a knockout in this main event. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the card. I appreciate you guys for supporting me and watching this video. Please like this video if you guys haven't already. It really helps me out. Subscribe to the channel, you guys. It's much appreciated. And I'll leave you with some quick parting words. I'm not going to go too deep. Save a nice, deep closing thought. Recap to the show for the UFC 294 fight card. But I'll throw this out to you guys. Obviously you guys are fight fans. Obviously you guys are mixed martial arts fans. And just be careful on the weekends when you're out with your family, your friends and whatnot. Be careful when you're glued to the TV too much. Obviously when the fights are on, you want to watch the fights, but maybe in that little in-between time, try to dabble a little bit, talking to the family, or if you're out at a restaurant, don't be glued to your phone watching the fight that you got action on. I mean, you don't want to miss the fights, of course, and you try to balance that. Maybe put some time in with the family or your friends before the fights kick off. Try to balance things, but don't be that dude that's at a restaurant, man, glued to your phone where your beautiful family's in front of you, or your girlfriend, or if it's your girlfriend, don't matter that much. Actually, stick to the phone. You don't want to deal with all that crap. But you guys know what I'm saying. If you got your friends next to you, you got people in town, enjoy the moment, embrace the moment. Just balance what you're doing, okay? Balance what you're doing. You see people out and about glued to their phones all the time. They're not present in the moment. Don't let yourself be one of those people, because these phones, man, they're addictive and they can really suck you in, man. Instagram and all that can suck you into them. Be careful, man. You got to be a little bit conscious sometimes, all right? Enjoy your life while you're here, because it flies by, and don't be in that comatose state, glued to your phone all the time, all right? So just want to throw that out at you guys, and I got a lot of great closing thoughts I want to throw you guys' way in the near future. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great week. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.